The sea has always been cruel. But sometimes the cruelest thing aboard a ship isn't the storm or the starvation, it's the captain himself. Picture this. The year is 1716, and the deck of an English merchantman creaks under the weight of hunger, heat, and hatred. The men wear their misery in their faces, salt-stung eyes, lips cracked from thirst, backs bent from endless labor. The captain struts like a king in his silks, his boots polished even as his men gnaw on worm-ridden biscuit. Punishments are daily, lashings savage, and the air carries more screams than laughter. A ship is supposed to be family, but here it is a prison, ruled by a tyrant who treats his sailors as cattle. Now imagine the moment the first whisper begins. It's not loud, not yet. A word traded between two men in the dark belly of the ship. What if we took her? The words taste like poison, like treason, but once spoken, they cannot be unsaid. Soon it spreads, mouth to ear, hammock to hammock, until even the youngest boy with salt still fresh on his cheeks knows that rebellion is brewing. And above, the captain sleeps in his fine cabin, dreaming of profits, blind to the storm rising in the hearts of his crew. Here's the secret no history book will tell you. Mutiny wasn't just about survival, it was about transformation. Ordinary sailors, beaten into the dirt, decided to seize power and paint a new destiny. But choosing mutiny was choosing exile, choosing outlawry, choosing the black flag. For once, that decision was made. There was no going back, ever. And so the night comes when the crew grips their knives tighter, their hearts pounding as footsteps echo across the deck. The lantern swings, the sea sighs, and a ship full of desperate men decides that before dawn, they will either be free or dead. What happened that night would become whispered legend. And it begins here, in the stillness before the first blade is drawn. The first sign of mutiny is not a knife at the throat, nor a pistol in the dark, it is silence. The heavy silence of men who no longer sing at the ropes, no longer laugh at the mess, no longer answer the captain's bark with anything but sullen eyes. Silence is the breath before the storm. And aboard the Providence, silence had ruled for weeks, growing heavier with each sunrise until it pressed on every man's chest like the weight of an anchor. And in that silence, the ember of rebellion smoldered, waiting for breath. The ship herself seemed to groan with the men's misery, her timbers creaking as though she too knew the lash of Captain Armitage's cruelty. For he was a man who measured power not in miles sailed or goods carried, but in scars carved into the backs of his crew. His voice a whip, his gaze a gallows. He was tall, square-jawed, his wig powdered even at sea, his boots polished, though the deck was awash with bilge, and he wore his sword as though it were a crown. To him, sailors were not brothers, but beasts, fit only to labor and to bleed, and bleed they did. For each day some infraction real or invented earned, the Cato 9, the whip singing as flesh split, blood spattering the planks. The men bit down on rope, grit their teeth, cursed under breath, but they endured, for endurance is the sailor's trade. Yet even endurance has its limit, and Armitage pushed them beyond it. The food was foul hardtack, crawling with weevils, pork salted to stone, water black with slime. Men chewed mold as if it were bread, drank sickness as if it were ale, and when they complained, the captain sneered, "The sea is no inn. You'll take what's given." His officers' thugs, in finer coats, enforced his will with fists and boots, taking pleasure in cruelty, knowing the men could not strike back. Yet whispers grew. In the belly of the ship, hammocks swaying in darkness, men spoke softly, their voices hushed but fierce. We could take her. We could be free. We could have her guns, her sails, her gold. Fear fought desire in every whisper. For mutiny was death if failed, glory if won. And no man knew which way the dice would fall. But one by one, the whispers spread, until even the youngest boy, his voice not yet broken, carried the ember in his chest. At the heart of it was Jacob Flynn, a gunner's mate with eyes sharp as flint and a back striped by more lashes than most men could count. He was no leader by title, no officer, but men followed him because he listened, because he bled beside them, because he shared his biscuit when others starved. "The captain feeds off our fear," he said one night, his voice low, a knife turning slow in his hand as the lantern swayed. "But fear cuts both ways. Let him taste it." Men leaned in, the ship rocking, the sea whispering against her hull, and in that moment the ember sparked. Plans were murmured knock. The officers senseless. Bind the captain, seize the keys, take the ship. Dangerous, desperate, but what choice was left? Death under lash, or freedom under black sail? Days dragged, tension taut as rigging in a gale. Armitage sensed something, perhaps, for his punishments grew harsher, his temper quicker, as if he too smelled the storm but thought to whip it back into the sky. He misjudged. Each lash only hardened the men's resolve. Each curse only stoked the fire. By the time the moon rose fat and yellow one breathless night, the decision was no longer if, but when, that night. Now Flynn moved first, rising from his hammock like a shadow, knife in hand, eyes burning. "For freedom," he whispered, and the words passed from lip to lip like a prayer. Men followed, silent as the dead, their hearts pounding like drums of war. The ship creaked, oblivious, as boots padded across planks, as hands tightened on wood and steel. The first officer dozed in his chair, drunk on stolen rum, his pistol at his belt. But his eyes never opened again. Flynn's knife flashed, and silence swallowed his gasp. Blood pooled on the planks, the first drop of a tide that would not be stemmed. The men surged, like wolves at last loosed. Into the heart of the ship. Doors splintered, shouts erupted, steel clashed in the dark. Officers staggered from hammocks, blades drawn, but rage outnumbered them. Hunger outmatched them, fury drove men who had known only submission. Knives struck, pistols cracked, the smell of powder burned the air. The boatswain fell screaming, the master's mate drowned in his own blood, and the crew roared not with fear but with something fiercer. Years of pain spilled in seconds, every lash repaid in steel. Yet through it all, the captain's cabin door loomed, its brass handle glinting in lantern light, untouched, unopened. Behind it lay Armitage, sleeping perhaps, dreaming of profit. Unaware that his world had already burned, Flynn stood before it, chest heaving, blood on his cheek, the knife still dripping. Men gathered at his back, eyes wide, breaths ragged. He raised his hand, and silence fell, save for the sea's endless sigh. "We cross the line here," he said, voice low but fierce. "Open this door, and there is no return. We'll not be sailors again. We'll be outlaws, pirates, men with no nation but the black flag. Is that the life you choose?" Silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. Then one by one, voices rose. "Hi, I. It grew, louder, fiercer, until the deck itself seemed to shake with their roar. Flynn nodded once, raised his boot, and kicked. The door flew inward. Captain Armitage rose, eyes wide, mouth opening, hand reaching for his sword, but too late. The crew surged like a wave, knives flashing, pistols cracking, his roar swallowed by the storm of their fury. Blood sprayed, screams tore, wood splintered. When it ended, Armitage lay sprawled across his silks, his powdered wig askew, his lifeblood soaking into the wood he had ruled with iron. The silence that followed was not heavy, not suffocating. It was vast, endless, like the horizon at dawn. Men stared at one another, breaths ragged, hearts pounding, the truth settling in. They were free. They were damned. They were pirates now. But freedom is not peace. Even as they stood, knives dripping, hearts wild, the sea outside roared louder, waves slamming harder, the wind rising with sudden violence. A storm was brewing, and the ink-black clouds on the horizon promised no mercy. Flynn turned, eyes blazing, and shouted above the gale, "Raise the black. She's ours, now let the world know it." The men roared in answer, and for the first time in their lives, their voices rang with pride, not fear. Yet, as the thunder cracked and lightning lit the deck, a single question lingered, unspoken but sharp as any blade. Had they truly seized their fate, or merely traded one master for another? The storm that followed Armitage's death was no accident of weather. At least that's how it felt to the men who had just murdered their captain and sworn themselves to freedom. Because, as the first crash of thunder split the night sky, the Providence reeled as though the heavens themselves sought to punish mutiny, her timbers groaning, her sails lashing like torn wings. And in that chaos, the crew now leaderless save for Jacob Flinfort. Not only the sea, but the fear that their souls had already been damned. Rain hammered like musket shot, waves crashed like cannon fire. Lightning tore the dark into jagged scars of white. And in the frenzy, Flynn stood at the helm, soaked to the bone, eyes blazing. His hands locked on the wheel as though he could bend fate itself, shouting hoarse orders into the storm. Reef the tops. Lash the guns. Haul, damn you, haul. And somehow the men obeyed, because, though they had killed their captain, they were not yet ready to die. They climbed the rigging, fingers bleeding, bodies whipped by wind. And when one fell screaming into the sea, his cry was swallowed before it even reached the deck. But no man faltered, because mutiny had bound them tighter than any rope. Survive together or perish all. The storm raged till dawn, a night without end. And when at last the sun split the horizon, pale and pitiless, the sea calmed, leaving the Providence battered but afloat, her sails ragged, her deck awash, her men hollow-eyed but alive. Flynn stood drenched, hands raw, but his voice carried iron as he faced the survivors. "She's ours now," he said, nodding at the ship, his words cutting through exhaustion. "The lash is gone. The whip is dead. But freedom has a price, and the world will hunt us for it." Silence stretched, broken only by gulls circling overhead, until one sailor, teeth missing from years of beatings, growled, "Then let them hunt. Better hunted free than chained alive." A murmur rose, voices hard, the ember of rebellion now ablaze. And Flynn reached into his coat, pulling forth a scrap of black cloth torn from a tarpaulin. With a knife he cut it into a square, crude and frayed. But when he climbed the mainmast and lashed it high, the men roared as though the gods themselves had spoken. Because the black flag was no longer a whisper or a dream, it was real. It snapped in the wind above their heads, declaring them pirates to sea and sky alike. The transformation was instant, yet terrifying. Men who had once been sailors of His Majesty's service now looked at one another not as shipmates, but as brothers of a new creed, united not by oath or nation, but by choice, to live by plunder, to defy kings, to take by blade what had been denied by lash. But freedom is a fire that burns as it warms, and already questions rose. Who would command? Who would set rules? Flynn, standing tall at the mast, blood on his cheek and salt in his beard, looked every inch the captain they needed. But pirates are not sheep, and leadership must be earned. In the gathering on deck, men shouted, argued, fists flying, each demanding a voice, until Flynn raised his hand and growled, "Enough. We're not slaves. We're brothers. We'll choose." And with that, they did what no king's ship ever allowed. One by one, calloused hands rose for Flynn. Their choice, not forced by whip, but given by will. And when the last hand lifted, the roar that followed was not of obedience, but of allegiance. Flynn bowed his head once, then spoke the words that sealed their fate. "I take the black not for me, but for all. We live free, we die free." That night, by lantern's glow, they drew up the articles, the pirate's code. Each man had a voice, each man an equal share, but betrayal would mean death. No theft from brother, Flynn declared. No striking in anger. No man keeps more than his share. And if ever we must choose, we choose together. The men cheered, though in their eyes flickered both relief and fear, because freedom also meant responsibility, and responsibility weighs heavier than chains. Yet the rum flowed, the songs rose, and for the first time in memory, laughter rang across the Providence's deck. They sang of freedom, of gold, of vengeance. Their voices ragged but proud, and the black flag above seemed to drink the stars themselves. But in the silence after song, when the sea was calm and the lanterns dimmed, some men lay awake, staring at the beams overhead, wondering if they had traded one tyranny for another, if freedom would taste sweet or rot like old biscuit. Days passed, the Providence sailing now not under orders but under choice, and the men learned the rhythm of piracy. Every sail on the horizon a question, every shadow a threat, every moment a test. The first merchantman they took was a Dutch brig, fat with sugar and tobacco, her crew unarmed, her captain trembling. Flynn led the charge, pistols in hand, and the brig surrendered without a shot. The pirates plundered her hold, cheering as barrels rolled across the deck, the sweetness of stolen sugar melting on tongues that had known only rot. It was victory, and it bound them tighter, proof that their choice had been right. But victory also painted a target on their backs, and word spread fast: mutiny aboard the Providence, a black flag risen, a new crew gone rogue. By the time they docked in a hidden cove to divide spoils, every port from Barbados to Nassau had heard the whisper: a mutinous crew sails free. Flynn kept discipline as best he could, enforcing the articles, dividing shares fair, settling disputes by vote. But freedom is a dangerous wind, and not all could ride it. Some drank too deep, some gambled too wild, some spoke of taking the ship for themselves. The black flag united, but it also tempted, for power is the sweetest plunder of all. Flynn watched, wary, his hand never far from steel, knowing that mutiny, once begun, never truly ends. It lingers, waiting, like a shark circling. Yet he stood firm, his presence a beacon, and the crew followed, for now. But shadows lengthened. One dusk, as gulls wheeled and the sea glowed red with sunset, a lookout cried, "Sail, ho!" On the horizon loomed not a merchantman, but a frigate, her hull sleek, her guns bristling, her flag the Red Cross of England. The Providence had been found. Panic threatened, but Flynn's voice cut sharp. We chose this life. Now we prove it. He ordered every scrap of sail hauled, every gun primed, every man armed, and the crew roared as the black flag snapped higher. The frigate closed, her guns thundered, the sea erupted in spray and smoke, and the Providence shuddered as shots smashed through her timbers. Men screamed, blood sprayed, splinters flew, but still they fought, answering with their own cannons, their own fury, their own defiance. The battle raged till nightfall, the frigate circling, the Providence limping, her decks slick with blood. Flynn stood at the bow, pistol in one hand, cutlass in the other, roaring at the storm of fire. Better free in death than chained in life. The men echoed him, their voices fierce, their bodies battered, their hearts ablaze. And though the frigate bore down with more guns, more men, more might, the pirates of the Providence held. Every shot, every blade, every scream defiance incarnate. At last, the frigate pulled back, unwilling to spend more blood, and vanished into the night. The Providence drifted, battered but unbroken, her crew torn but alive, her flag still flying. In the silence that followed, Flynn dropped to his knees, bloodied, weeping, laughing. They had survived. They had proven themselves. They were pirates, true and eternal. Yet even as dawn rose, painting the sea gold, one thought chilled every man who breathed. The world now knew their name, and the hunt had only begun. The sea was calm after the battle, unnaturally calm, the kind of silence that made men hear their own hearts pounding in their skulls. And aboard the battered Providence, the pirates moved like ghosts, patching sails with trembling hands, binding wounds with strips torn from shirts already stiff with blood. Every man aware that though they had driven off the frigate, they were marked now, hunted, damned in the eyes of every king's navy, and that knowledge pressed heavier than chains. Jacob Flynn walked the deck barefoot, boots lost in the chaos of cannon fire, his feet leaving streaks of blood, not all of it his own. And though his body screamed with exhaustion, his mind burned with iron clarity. If the black flag was to endure, it must not just defy, it must survive. And survival demanded more than courage, it demanded ruthlessness. The crew gathered at the mainmast, their faces gaunt and wild-eyed, some still laughing with the madness of victory, others hollow with dread, and Flynn faced them, his voice rough but strong. We fought the lion and lived, but lions hunt in packs. More will come. If we're to live free, we must strike first. We must take what we need before it takes us. A murmur rippled through them, hunger and fear in equal measure, until one sailor spat black blood and growled, "Aye, Captain, but where? We've powder enough for one broadside, water for a week, food for less. Hunt too long and the sea starves us before the king's dogs do." Flynn's gaze swept the horizon, empty save for gulls wheeling, and answered, "Then we hunt close. Merchant lanes run thick near the windward passage, fat ships, slow ships, and if fortune favors, a prize rich enough to buy us months." His words lit the men's eyes, for nothing stoked a pirate's heart like the promise of plunder, and the decision was made. The Providence, patched with desperation, turned her bow toward. Blood-dot days passed, every dawn a knife edge, every dusk a question of survival. The food dwindled to wormy biscuit, the water casks stank, Men grew lean and mean, snapping at one another over scraps. Yet their eyes never left the horizon, their dreams filled with sails fat with goods ripe for taking. Flynn kept them sharp, drilling gunnery, assigning watches, punishing theft with a pistol but rather than lash. For he knew pirates respected pain but demanded fairness, and fairness bound them more than fear. Still, Mutiny whispered, for once. Men taste blood, they hunger for more, and more never comes fast enough. On the 5th day, when the sun sank red, the lookout cried, "Sail, ho!" And every man scrambled, hearts roaring, eyes straining. There she was, a Spanish galleon, fat-bellied, gold-glutted, crawling slow with the wind. A cheer rose, savage and fierce, and Flynn's voice cut through it like steel, guns primed. "Silence till I give the word. We take her not as beggars, but as kings." The Providence crept close, black flag snapping, her crew crouched behind rails, pistols loaded, cutlasses gleaming. The galleon loomed, her sides gilded, her decks crowded with sailors unaware of the storm creeping upon them. At the last moment, Flynn roared. Now, cannons thundered, smoke enveloped, wood splintered, men screamed. Grappling hooks flew, lines tightened, and the pirates surged aboard like wolves. What followed was slaughter. Pistols cracked in close quarters, blades clashed, the air thick with powder and blood. Flynn carved a path through Spaniards, his cutlass slick, his voice hoarse as he shouted, "No mercy." Men fell screaming into the sea, bodies crushed under boots, gold spilling from crates as holds were ripped open. The galleon's captain, a proud man with velvet coat, met Flynn in a clash of steel, their blades sparking, their curses flying in different tongues but the same fury. At last Flynn's cutlass bit deep, and the Spaniard toppled, his blood pooling across the deck he had once commanded. Victory roared, but victory was never clean. The galleon's decks were slick with gore, her survivors chained, her cargo seized. And when the pirates returned to the Providence, their pockets heavy, their bellies filled with stolen wine, their laughter echoed across the waves. Yet the sea remembers blood. Sharks followed, shadows gliding beneath the wake, drawn by the carnage. For days they lingered, circling, their fins slicing the water, a reminder that the sea has teeth sharper than any cutlass. At night, men swore. They heard them bump the hull, waiting, patient, hungering. Flynn watched them with unease, for he knew the sea was never generous, and what it gave, it demanded back. Still, the spoils brought relief. Gold coins clinked, sugar melted sweet on tongues. Tobacco smoked, rich and thick. Rum burned warm in bellies, and for a moment, just a moment, the Providence felt like freedom's promise made flesh. But promises rot fast at sea. With plunder came envy, with rum came quarrels, and within a week, blood spilled not from Spaniards, but from brothers. 2 men argued over a pouch of gold, knives flashing, one dead before dawn, the other thrown to the sharks thrashing below. Flynn enforced the articles, but each death chipped at their unity. Each fight whispered that mutiny never truly dies. Keen, his first mate now, warned him one night as they stood by the rail, watching fins cut moonlit water. "They'll turn on you if you falter, Jacob. Pirates don't follow kings long." Flynn spat into the sea, eyes burning. "Then I'll not falter. Let them see if they can find a better man to lead." Yet in his heart he knew Keen was right. The black flag united them, but it also cursed them, for men who chose mutiny once might choose it again and again, until only blood remained. The test came sooner than he feared. One dawn, Sails loomed again, but not a fat merchantman. An English man no war, bristling with guns, her flag snapping bright. Panic rippled, some crying to flee, others to fight, and voices rose until the deck shook with argument. Flynn silenced them with pistol fire into the air. We cannot outrun her. We cannot outgun her, but we can outthink her. He laid his plan quick and hard. Feign surrender, lure them close, then strike with fire and fury. The men grumbled, but desperation bound them, and the trap was set. The man-o'-war closed, her guns ready, her captain calling for submission. Flynn ordered the black flag lowered, the crew pretending fear, hands raised. Boats were lowered, redcoats rowing with chains ready. And then, as they clambered aboard, Flynn roared. Now, pistols flared, cutlasses flashed, and chaos erupted. The man-o'-war's captain fell with a ball through his chest. His men cut down before they could react, and the pirates roared as they seized powder, fire, blood. The larger ship recoiled, her crew in disarray, and the Providence fled, her sails straining, her flag risen once more. They had lived again, but the cost mounted, powder near gone. Men fewer, wounds festering. Blood in the water, always more blood. Flynn stood at the bow, salt wind whipping, watching sharks trail close, their fins cutting black arcs. He knew the truth now. Mutiny had freed them. Piracy had defined them. But the sea was patient, and blood always calls to blood. The question was no longer if the sea would claim them, but when, and in whose name. And as the sun bled into the horizon, a whisper spread among the men, soft but sharp. Why should Flynn lead forever? Didn't we all choose the black? The ember of mutiny, once more, had begun to glow. The wind had shifted with the crew's mood, a restless, snarling wind that carried mutiny on its back like a rider. And aboard the scarred Providence, every face was split between loyalty and hunger, fear and ambition, because though Jacob Flynn had led them through storm and slaughter, though he had raised the black flag and given them freedom, freedom is a fire that consumes as much as it warms. And men who had bled together now whispered in corners, glancing at him with eyes sharp as blades, weighing whether one man's vision should still rule them all, or whether the articles they had sworn by meant that no captain could stand forever. Flynn felt it like a noose tightening, every step across the deck a gauntlet, every murmur a threat. And though he kept his head high and his cutlass near, he knew the sea had taught these men one truth above all: power is plunder, and plunder can always be taken. The signs were everywhere. Dice games ended in fists, disputes over spoils turned to knives. Rum flowed too freely, and tongues loosed talk of fresh leadership, of shares fairer under a new hand. And Flynn saw who fanned the flames keen. His own first mate, once loyal but now restless, a man with charm as sharp as his dagger, who whispered that perhaps the Providence had been cursed, not by the sea or the flag, but by the stubborn grip of one captain who thought himself untouchable. Flynn knew the sea offered no comfort, only choices, and so he made his: to act before mutiny flowered again, to bind his men tighter not by fear or lash, but by prize. A prize so rich, so bold, so impossible it would drown every whisper in gold. He gathered the crew under a blood-red sunset, the horizon aflame, and his voice carried across the deck, rough but commanding. Brothers, we bleed, we starve, we fight, and still we endure. But what is endurance without reward? I say we strike a prize that will feed us for years. A treasure so vast no navy could match us. Eyes gleamed, hunger sharpening, voices muttering. And Flynn let the silence stretch before he named it, a Spanish treasure fleet. Bound for Havana, holds enough silver to buy kingdoms. If we take just one galleon from that fleet, we are kings ourselves. The roar that followed was savage. Hungry, every man's dream of wealth set alight. But beneath it, Flynn caught Keen's smirk, a shadow across the fire. And he knew the bargain he had struck. Bind them to him with promise of gold, or lose them to mutiny before dawn. The plan was madness, and every man knew it. Treasure fleets sailed guarded, bristling with guns, their holds bursting with soldiers as well as silver. To strike one was to strike the lion in its den. Yet pirates thrive on madness, and desperation makes cowards into wolves. For days they sailed, the Providence patched and limping but driven by greed, her crew sharpening blades, cleaning pistols, whispering of mountains of silver, of freedom not just from lash but from want itself. Flynn moved among them, encouraging, warning, promising, his voice iron and honey in equal measure. Though in the dark he lay awake, staring at the beams, hearing again the whispers of sharks beneath, knowing this gamble was not just for gold, but for his life. At last, the fleet was sighted, sails like a forest on the horizon, galleons fat and gleaming, their escorts sharp and swift. The pirates gathered, breathless, their hearts pounding with equal parts terror and desire. Flynn laid the plan quick and ruthless. We do not fight the fleet. We bleed it. Wait till night, creep close, strike one ship before the others wake. Fast, fierce, and gone before they can rally. The men nodded, some eager, some pale, all bound now by the bargain. As dusk fell, the Providence slipped through the waves, silent as a shark, her lanterns doused, her crew crouched in shadow. The chosen target was the Santa Teresa, a galleon fat with silver, her lanterns glowing like a floating cathedral. The pirates' mouths watered at the sight, their eyes wide, and Flynn's voice was a whisper. Remember the articles. Share fair, stand true, and we live. They struck with the ferocity of starving wolves. Grappling hooks flew, cutlasses gleamed, pistols cracked in the dark. The Santa Teresa roared awake, her bells clanging, her crew scrambling. But the pirates were already aboard, screaming, hacking, biting through flesh and fear alike. Flynn carved a path, his cutlass red, his pistol smoking, his voice carrying like thunder for the black. Spaniards fell, their blood painting silver crates, and the galleon's decks ran slick. Keen fought at his side, his grin wild, his blade vicious, and together they drove forward to the captain's cabin, where the treasure lay. The fight was brutal, savage, every corner contested. But by dawn the Santa Teresa flew the black flag, her survivors chained, her hold thrown open. The sight broke even hardened pirates. Silver stacked like walls, gold spilling like water, jewels glinting like fire. Men wept, laughed, kissed coins with bloody lips. Flynn stood amidst it, his face pale, his body trembling, because he knew this was not just plunder, it was temptation incarnate, enough to make men gods or devils. He enforced the articles with an iron hand, dividing shares fair, demanding discipline, warning that greed would gut them faster than steel. Yet even as coins clinked into pouches, he saw Keen's eyes, calculating, and heard the murmurs grow again. Why follow Flynn when we are rich enough to follow none? The return was chaos. The fleet had awoken, escorts bearing down, cannon fire thundering, and the Providence fled like a hunted wolf, her sails straining, her decks awash. The Santa Teresa, too heavy to keep, was set aflame, her treasure transferred in frenzy, her hull glowing red as dawn broke. Flames roared, smoke billowed, and the sea burned as the pirates escaped, their pockets heavy, their hearts wild. Yet the price was steep, men dead, powder spent, the Providence scarred near to breaking. Flynn stood at the helm, face streaked with blood and soot, and shouted above the inferno, "We have the world in our hands, but only if we hold together." The crew roared in answer, but beneath it he heard the fracture, the crack, the hunger that gold could never silence. Back in the hidden cove, the treasure was divided, shares counted, disputes flaring into fists and blades. Flynn enforced order with steel and pistol, but Keane fanned the flames, whispering that perhaps the articles meant no man need lead at all, that perhaps Flynn kept more than his share in truth if not in coin, that perhaps freedom meant not just plunder but power. The crew wavered, torn between loyalty and greed, brotherhood and ambition. Flynn faced them one night beneath the black flag, his voice ragged but fierce. "You think this treasure frees you? It binds you. It paints a target larger than any flag. Without order we are meat for the Navy, silver or none. Stand with me, and we are pirates eternal. Stand against me, and you are corpses waiting to float." His words cut deep, silenced many, but Keane's smirk lingered, and Flynn knew the devil's bargain was struck not with Spain, not with kings, but with his own crew. The sharks returned, drawn by blood spilled in quarrels, their fins slicing moonlight, their eyes unblinking. Flynn watched them from the rail, Keane at his side, and the silence between them was heavier than cannon shot. One day, Keane said softly, almost kindly, "They'll choose me." Flynn's hand tightened on his cutlass, but he did not strike, not yet. "One day," he replied, "they'll remember why they chose me first." The sea whispered, the sharks circled, and the black flag snapped above, both banner and curse, a promise that freedom always demanded blood. And as dawn rose, painting the treasure-strewn deck gold, the question loomed like thunder: had Flynn bound his men with fortune, or doomed them with it? The black flag still snapped above the Providence, but beneath its shadow, the crew's unity frayed like an old rope strained past its strength. Because treasure had not bound them as Flynn had hoped it, had sharpened their hunger, their envy, their ambition. And in every glance between shipmates was the unspoken question: who among us holds more? Who among us deserves less? Who among us should command when fortune itself now weighs our decks? Gold clinked in pouches tied at belts, silver shone in crates stashed below. Jewels glimmered in lantern light like unblinking eyes, and each coin was a seed of discord, each gem a blade pressed between brothers, so that laughter at dice games turned to snarls, and rum-fueled songs ended in fists. Flynn watched it unfold with iron face, enforcing the articles with pistol and cutlass, reminding them that fairness was their only shield against chaos. Yet even as he spoke of equality, he saw suspicion burning. Did the captain take a larger share? Did he hide coins in his cabin? Did he wield order for the crew's sake or for his own? These whispers flowed like poison, and Flynn knew their source. Keane, his first mate, his shadow turned serpent, whose tongue spun doubt as skillfully as his blade spun steel. Keane laughed among the men, drank with them, whispered with them, always smiling, always reminding them that pirates had no kings, and what was a captain but a king in another coat? Flynn felt the rope of trust unravel, strand by strand, and though he held the wheel steady, he knew the storm would break not from sea or navy, but from within. One night, beneath a moon swollen and pale, Flynn heard the murmur of voices through the deck planks. Men huddled in the hold, their whispers sharp as knives. He crept close, listening, and the words chilled him. Why bleed for Flynn? Why not for ourselves? We chose him once, we can unchoose him now. Keen's voice answered, smooth and steady. No lash, no chains, no tyrants. That was the promise. But tell me, are we free, or do we still bow? A murmur of assent rose, low and dangerous, and Flynn's hand tightened on the pistol at his belt. He could storm down, silence them with steel. But steel cannot kill suspicion, and blood spilled brother to brother would split the crew beyond repair. So he waited, biding, knowing that mutiny once chosen is never buried, only sleeping. The test came at dawn. A sail was sighted, a French merchantman heavy with wine and silk, and Flynn ordered the chase, his voice sharp with command. The men obeyed, but slowly, sullenly, eyes flicking not to him but to Keene, who stood at the rail with arms folded, smiling as though amused. The Providence closed, guns roared, and the Frenchman surrendered quick, her hold spilling riches, her crew begging for mercy. Flynn spared them, enforcing the articles. No slaughter when surrender's given, he declared, his voice firm, but a growl rose among the men. Mercy? Spat one, blood on his beard. Mercy buys no rum. Keene stepped forward then, his voice carrying like silk over steel. Mercy is a captain's word, not a pirate's law. Should we not all decide? The crew cheered, their eyes alight, and in that moment Flynn saw his authority fracture, splintered by Keene's hand. He faced them, fury in his eyes, and roared, I am no tyrant, but I will not see us damned by butchery. Articles stand, or we are nothing but beasts. The men hesitated, torn, until Keene laughed lightly and spread his hands. Let it stand, then. For now, the moment passed, but the wound had been cut, and Flynn knew it would fester. The nights grew longer, darker, every whisper a blade, every glance a challenge. Flynn drank little, slept less, his eyes always scanning, his hand never far from steel. Keene moved like a shadow, charming, coaxing, fanning embers into flame. Fights broke out over spoils, blood spilled on deck, and Flynn punished swiftly. But each punishment cost him loyalty, each corpse another crack in the hull of trust. The sharks returned, circling always, their fins slicing moonlit water, as though the sea itself waited for the ship to break. Flynn stood at the rail, staring down at their endless circles, and thought, are they waiting for us or for me? At last, the storm broke. One dawn, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Keene stood tall before the crew, his voice loud, his eyes burning. Brothers, he cried, we swore no kings, no tyrants, no chains. Yet here we are, bound still to one man's word. Why should Flynn command our lives, our deaths, our gold? Are we not free men? Let us choose anew. A roar rose, fierce and wild, the crew stamping feet, slamming fists, their eyes alight with hunger for change. Flynn stepped forward, cutlass drawn, his voice thunder. You dare call mutiny? After all we've bled, after all we've won, you think freedom is without law, without order. You think Keane will save you when the Navy hangs you high. His words cut, but Keane's smile was sly. I think freedom means no master but ourselves. Let us vote. If you are the man they still want, let it be shown. If not, stand aside. The deck fell silent, the sea itself holding breath. One by one, hands rose, not all, not most, but enough, too many, and Flynn's heart clenched. Betrayal had bloomed full. He looked into their faces, men who had once followed him through storm and blood, and saw not loyalty but greed, fear, ambition. For a long moment he said nothing, the silence thick, until at last he lowered his cutlass, his voice rough with fury held tight. So be it, choose. But know this, whatever flag you fly, the sea will demand its price. The vote was swift, brutal in its honesty. Keane took the deck, the men roaring their approval, the black flag snapping above as though mocking Flynn himself. Keane turned to him, his eyes triumphant, his smile cruel. You see, Jacob, no tyrants, no kings, not even you. But Flynn was no man to bow. He spat at Keane's boots, his eyes burning like coals. Enjoy your crown of ash, he snarled. The sea does not share power long. And with that, he strode below, alone, the sound of laughter and cheering echoing like knives. He knew what came next. Keane could not let him live, not as rival, not as symbol. Yet Flynn had lived too long in mutiny's shadow to be caught unready. He gathered his pistol, his cutlass, his courage, and waited. The strike came at night. Keane entered with 2 men, blades drawn, eyes cold. Nothing personal, Jacob, he said softly. But freedom leaves no rivals. Flynn moved like lightning, pistol cracking, one man dropping with skulls shattered. Steel clashed in the dark, cutlasses sparking, grunts filling the cabin. Flynn fought like a man with nothing to lose, his blade biting, his rage burning. He carved one down, but Keane matched him stroke for stroke, their duel fierce, savage, brother against brother. Blood sprayed, furniture shattered, the lantern fell, flames licking wood. At last Flynn's blade struck deep. Keane gasped, staggered, but drove his dagger into Flynn's side even as he fell. Both men collapsed, blood pooling, fire spreading. The cabin a hell of smoke and flame. The crew burst in, shouting, dragging them apart, stamping fire. Flynn lay gasping, his vision dim, Keane coughing blood but laughing still. Kill me, Flynn croaked, his eyes blazing, or I'll rise again. But the crew, torn, terrified, bound both men in chains, their unity shattered, their brotherhood drowned in betrayal. The Providence drifted, her black flag still snapping, but her heart broken, her crew divided, her future uncertain. Flynn closed his eyes, the taste of blood thick, and thought. The sea always takes its due, and outside, in the endless dark, the sharks circled closer, waiting. The Providence drifted like a ghost upon the open sea, her sails tattered, her decks scarred by fire and blood, her crew gaunt with hunger and suspicion. For the duel between Jacob, Flynn, and Keane had left them not with a captain, but with 2. Wounded lions chained in the same cage. Each man broken, yet unbowed, each man a symbol to half the crew. And in their division, the black flag above seemed less a banner of freedom than a curse, snapping mockingly in the wind as though the sea herself laughed at their folly. Flynn lay in the surgeon's corner, his side bound, pain searing like fire, his eyes burning with the knowledge that mutiny never ends but only changes its mask. While Keen bound across the hold, coughed blood, yet smiled still, whispering to those who crept close that Flynn was finished. That leadership meant nothing when the crew could choose another dawn, another master, another dream, and thus the ship rotted from within. A kingdom split, a family torn, every man staring at his brother with suspicion sharp as steel. The sharks circled ceaseless, black fins cutting arcs beneath the hull. Drawn by the endless trail of blood, the Providence now seemed cursed to spill. And at night, their bodies thudded against the planks, as if demanding entry. A reminder that the sea does not forget. Rations dwindled fast. The treasure had been their triumph, but not their salvation. For silver cannot be eaten, gold cannot quench thirst, jewels cannot fill a belly. Wormy biscuit was fought over like diamonds. Barrels of water dwindled to brackish swill, and men whispered that perhaps the sea demanded payment not in coin but in flesh. Dice games grew bloody, disputes ended in knives, and corpses slid overboard nightly, their splashes answered by the churn of fins. Flynn rose one dawn despite his wounds, staggering to the deck, and faced the hollow-eyed crew, his voice ragged but fierce. "We are not beasts. We are pirates, and pirates live free by code, not by slaughter. The articles bind us still," but his words rang hollow. For hunger deafens ears, and Keen's laughter drifted from below like poisoned smoke. Code, articles. Aye, and what has that bought you but scars and famine? Freedom means taking, not begging. Choose me, and I'll lead you to fat ships. Full bellies, no more hunger. The men wavered, torn. And Flynn saw it in their eyes. The black flag had freed them, but left them rudderless, and without unity. Freedom was nothing but another word for doom. The breaking point came with the storm. Clouds rose like mountains, thunder cracked like cannon, rain fell in sheets, and the Providence reeled, her battered timbers groaning. Men scrambled aloft, their bodies lashed by wind. But discipline had long since frayed, and ropes snapped, sails tore, curses drowned in thunder. Lightning split the sky, and in its flash, Flynn saw Keen, unchained by his loyalists, standing tall upon the deck with pistol in hand, his eyes burning. No more waiting. He roared above the gale. "Flynn leads us to death. Choose now me or the grave." The crew froze, caught between storm and mutiny, between sea and steel. Flynn staggered forward, cutlass drawn, his body screaming but his voice thunder. "Better death free than life betrayed. You follow Keen, you follow ruin." The two men faced each other, storm howling, lightning crowning them both. And in that moment, the Providence became not a ship but a stage for the oldest battle, brother against brother, freedom against ambition, law against chaos. Steel clashed, sparks flying, rain hissing on blades. Flynn fought with the desperation of a man who had nothing left to lose, Keen with the hunger of a man who would have everything. Around them the crew shouted, cursed, prayed, some for Flynn, some for Keen, some only for survival. The deck tilted, waves crashing, water sweeping across planks as if the sea itself sought to wash them all away. Keen lunged, his dagger flashing, but Flynn parried, his cutlass biting, and the two locked faces inches apart, eyes blazing. "You think you're better than me," Keen hissed. "You think you're their savior? You're nothing but another tyrant," Flynn snarled back. "And you're nothing but another mutineer, waiting to be eaten by the sea." With a roar, he shoved, steel driving deep, and Keen gasped, staggered, blood spilling black in the storm. But even as he fell, he smiled, his voice a rasp. Then the sea will take you to Keen toppled, crashing into the flood, washing across deck, his body swept toward the rail, seized in an instant by the circling sharks whose fins cut closer than ever. The crew cried out, some in horror, some in relief, as blood fanned across the waves and fins thrashed in frenzy. Flynn stood gasping, his body shaking, his cutlass dripping, the storm roaring around him. And for one moment, one heartbeat, he was captain again, unchallenged, unbroken. But the sea is merciless. A mast cracked, crashing down, crushing men beneath. The wheel spun wild, and the Providence lurched, her hull splitting, water gushing in torrents. Panic erupted, pirates screaming, clinging, praying as the ship groaned her death knell. Flynn seized the wheel, his voice roaring above the chaos. To the pumps, save her. She's ours still. But it was too late. The sea had chosen. The Providence sank that night, her treasure dragging her down like an anchor of greed, her black flag vanishing into the deep as though swallowed by the devil himself. Men leaped into the waves, their cries cut short by teeth and foam, bodies thrashing, then gone. Flynn fought, clinging to wreckage, salt stinging his wounds, the storm tearing at him like claws. Around him, the sea boiled with sharks and drowning men, cries fading into silence one by one. He drifted through the night, half dead, half dreaming, seeing faces of those he had led, those he had killed, those who had betrayed and been betrayed. When dawn broke, the sea was calm once more, littered with wreckage, blood, and silence. Of the Providence and her proud black flag, nothing remained but bones. Flynn lived, cast ashore days later upon a nameless isle, half starved, half mad. Clutching still the cutlass that had carved his fate, he staggered into jungle and silence. No crew, no flag, no fortune, only memory. Yet in his heart still burned the ember of defiance, the whisper that though the sea had taken all, it had not taken his will. And those who later found him wrecked fishermen. Wary traders spoke of a man with eyes like stormfire, who told them tales of mutiny and freedom, of treasure fleets and betrayal, of sharks that never stopped circling. Some called him mad, some prophet, some pirate still. But all agreed his words carried weight, as if the sea itself spoke through him, and so the legend grew. The Providence was gone, her treasure lost, her crew devoured, her black flag sunk. But Jacob Flynn's name lived on, whispered in taverns, shouted in storm, cursed by captains, prayed by sailors. Was he a hero who freed men from chains, or a devil who damned them to death? No one knew, for the sea keeps her secrets. But those who heard his tale swore that in the dead of night, when the wind howls and the water churns, you can see a flag rising black upon the horizon, and hear the clash of blades, the roar of mutiny, the scream of sharks circling forever. And if you listen closer, you may hear a voice whisper, "Freedom always has a price. Will you pay it?"